All right. Hey, everybody. So my name is Eric,
And I'm Catherine.
and we are from the Counseling Center at Spalding University. We're recording a video separately here, but part of this is to promote, to let you know that we're going to be starting a supportive group for students over the summer. And the intention is, if you're experiencing any kind of stress at all, concerns about all the changes that have happened with the pandemic, or just like a chance to connect and chat with some other students, we're going to be covering some coping skills that you may find helpful during this time, and also just a place to connect and chat, like we said. So for today, we are going to just give an example of a self-compassion exercise that you may find useful. It'll serve as an example of the type of thing that we're going to cover in the group. So, Catherine, if you're ready, I'm going to essentially be walking Catherine through an exercise that is intended to foster a self-compassionate attitude towards some stressors that all of us may be experiencing at this time. So,
Sounds good.
perfect. So I'll start off just giving a brief introduction, talking about self-compassion. And it rests on this assumption that, some amount of pain, suffering, disappointment is an inherent part of being human. We are certainly imperfect beings, and we all will unfortunately have hardships at some point in our lives. And when we face one of those inevitable difficulties, responding in a self-compassionate way by just mindfully acknowledging instead of trying to resist or suppress that difficult feeling, and then acting like a good friend and showing kindness towards ourselves instead of beating ourselves up or acting like a bully, can just help to reduce some of that suffering. And thought this would be particularly pertinent right now, because COVID, the pandemic, has presented a significant number of challenges for a lot of people, whether that's fear about actually getting the virus or somebody you love getting it, the isolation that a lot of people are feeling from friends and family, or just some general anxiety, sadness, uneasiness about having our world really flipped upside down and losing that sense of normalcy. So I'm going to walk through, like I said, just steps of an exercise that can help you to adopt a self-compassionate attitude during this stressful time with the pandemic. So the first thing to do is just think about, and Catherine, I'll have you do this, is to just think about a current struggle that you might be having. It doesn't have to be something overly catastrophic, but maybe some aspect, some situation in your life that's causing a little bit of stress.
You're right. There's a lot of stressful things happening right now. Trying to narrow it down to one.
Yeah.
It's been difficult working from home, doing classes from home. I'm sure you feel the same way, where we used to be able to be on campus, and when I'm sitting in class, that's class time. And when I come home, that's my relaxation time. It's hard to compartmentalize all the different things you need to do when you're doing everything from home. So I think finding motivation to get all my different things done for class and work and starting dissertation, all those things.
Gosh, yeah, the D word.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you touch on there's no boundary now between work and not work at home.
Yeah.
It's really tough. Yeah, so, if you think about one or even a couple of those examples, are there ways you can identify that at times you feel like you get caught up in stories about those worries or anxieties, or, maybe letting the emotions, the anxiety or difficult emotions kind of run away with you, such that they're getting exacerbated or maybe exaggerated in a way, like thinking about the future with all of this?
Yeah, I think I definitely get sort of anxious and get frustrated with myself when I'm not completing things that I set out to do and not having the motivation to do them. And, a lot of should statements come into my head of, oh, I should have been able to get all this done today. And all that kind of leads to just a lot of avoidance for me, honestly, where I don't want to do any of it. And it's easier to put it off than to face it.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think I'm studying for our comprehensive exams, and there's that feeling where I start to run away with the fear of not being really motivated and productive, and, telling myself I'm not going to be able to do it. And I think that fear kind of gets exaggerated. So then the next step is see if you can just acknowledge the difficult emotions you might be feeling in the moment without exaggerating or getting too lost in kind of those stories you can create. So trying to be validating, but also objective, So yeah, I'll let you start and then I can.
I'm thinking, I think I can acknowledge that there's some fear of failure.
Yeah.
And that it is stressful being in this environment.
Yeah, no, I think to give an example of, just saying, what, yeah, it is hard right now to find motivation. I think for me, trying to prepare in this time for comprehensive exams is difficult, and it's hard to be as motivated at home. And, that is a little bit challenging, disconcerting at times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a fourth step is see if there are possibly ways that the situation is making you feel isolated or alone. That maybe this is something that's impacting you more than others or distancing you from kind of general humanity in some way.
Maybe thoughts of like, I'm the only one going through this, or some other people don't have to deal with this, where that could be kind of isolating. Maybe if I compare myself to people that aren't in school right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. I feel like I look around and, there's so many productive people around me. I feel like, oh man, everybody else is doing fine. And, I feel like I'm more impacted or less productive than others.
Yeah, and I see people, still working from home, their 9-to-5 jobs, and I start thinking, well, if they can sit there and work from 9 to 5, I should be able to sit down and work from 9 to 5.
Yes. I heard recently the quote that comparison is the thief of joy, and I think it's the thief of a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then the next step in trying to cultivate a self-compassionate stance is see if you can try and tap into the common humanity of the situation. That what you and me too are feeling really is normal, and that in fact some of the things we're feeling really connects us to the experience of being human rather than sets us apart. That we all have these common emotions, and that this reaction to a really difficult situation is not only common, but unifying as well.
I think that's a good point. And I think it is good to remind ourselves we're not in this alone, and everyone's going through this pandemic, and it's creating struggles for everyone.
And I think just because it seems like somebody's not struggling or it seems like they're productive, it doesn't tell the whole story. Certainly we always have that on social media, that you kind of see the best. And, even comparing what you've said really resonates with my experience too. And I think that often we are having the same experience, but it's just not something that, we acknowledge or talk about.
Definitely.
Yeah. So two more quick things. The sixth one is for ways that you might be judging yourself harshly or critically. I know that I'm certainly a big one for being rather critical of myself, but are there ways that you feel like when you're, in a difficult situation, can speak harshly to yourself?
I'm sure. I'm trying to think of a specific example. I think some of the things I've listed already, just like, well, you should be able to do this, and why aren't you being more productive? You're
Yeah.
being lazy.
Yeah, those shoulds are big ones that go in my head as well. Uh, so the final step, and probably the most important one, is just see if you can, when you notice those voices, and maybe you can take one, like you should be more productive,
Yeah.
and try and foster that more compassionate, kind stance and voice towards yourself. See if you can maybe give yourself that little bit of soothing and reassurance instead of the criticism and coldness.
I think the first thing that came to mind for me was you're doing the best you can.
Yeah. It's powerful to hear you say that too. I think just can share. I'm often just so critical to myself. To just acknowledge and show that kindness can feel really impactful.
Yeah.
Some other examples, maybe just if it feels natural to say to yourself, I'm sorry you're going through this difficult time or lonely time
Yeah.
experience. I know you're doing your best. I think that's really good.
Maybe even adding, you're not in this alone.
We're going to get through this. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think too that it's okay and natural to feel a little bit anxious or, uncertain. And then respond with that, soothing, kind attitude. The last thing I'll say is I've found the best way to try and foster that compassionate stance towards yourself is to think about how you would treat a friend or a loved one if they were in the same situation as you. Like I know if, say, my sister was taking classes, I wouldn't berate her and say, oh, you should be more productive and lazy. It'd be like, yeah, this is really hard. Trying to do this from home and stay motivated during this uncertain time. So often we're so much more critical and impatient with ourselves than we are with anybody else. And it shouldn't be that way. With practice, we can be a good friend and ally to ourselves. And usually kindness is a better motivator than being critical. We think it's helping us, but it usually doesn't really make us more productive or fix the problem.
Definitely.
So anyway,
sorry.
No, you go.
When you talked about what you'd say to your sister, I thought of something I said recently to a friend of mine was, she was having a bad day, couldn't get anything done, kept becoming tearful. And I just said, like, it's okay. Like, lean into it. You're having those feelings and try again tomorrow.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a great example. So anyway, hopefully that helped. I will say I borrowed part of that exercise from Neff and Germer here, the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. And I'll try and post a link under the video to some more exercises if you found this helpful to continue practicing some self-compassion. But we will be sending out an announcement about getting a group going. So again, probably some of the things we'll focus on are just some general coping, mindfulness, some self-compassion, cultivating that self-compassionate stance, as well as whatever is coming up for any of you. So
Definitely.
any and all are welcome, and we hope to see you there. Cool.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. Bye.